When humans have conflict with each other, it's almost always because of a lack of communication, empathy, or compassion, or all of the above. Well, now throw illness, pain, anxiety, and fear into the equation, and you've got an emotional atom bomb just waiting to ruin someone's day. Well, this is what nurses have to deal with on the daily. It takes emotional resilience to endure a 12-hour shift in the clinical environment that's stressful, but coupled with the intricacies of patient psychology. Yet the essential soft skills of emotional intelligence get next to no attention in nursing school. And this is the gaping hole that registered nurse Beth Boyton sought to address with her school, Boyton Improv Education, which helps nurses work on those essential soft skills using experiential teaching strategies. So with that said, let's uncover the important skills you're not taught in nursing school and how you can improve them. All right. Okay, Beth. So in almost all nurse training programs, there's a pretty exclusive focus on developing the hard skills of healthcare knowledge and critical thinking. So in the context of nursing, what are the soft skills?
Well, the soft skills are this like broad or umbrella term for things like anything to do with human interactions, relationships, our personal boundaries, our professional boundaries, how we behave, how we deal with our feelings. I think we can put in that category emotional intelligence, how our ability to speak up and listen, how we work in teams, our relationships as leaders or as followers. So all those things.
It's incredibly broad, yeah.
Yeah.
What is the most important soft skill nurses should be conscious of working on during their training and I suppose throughout their careers?
I'm going to answer that by saying it's emotional intelligence. That's really probably more than one soft skill, but it gives me a way to put it in one simple way. And that underneath that would be to have self-awareness and awareness of others, to know what you're feeling and how to manage that, what's appropriate behavior. And also super important for nurses to be able to read emotional cues of patients and families and others. So yeah. I'm gonna say emotional intelligence.
Yeah, gives you good wiggle room.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you tell me a story about how soft skills made a big difference in a patient's or nurse's life? I
can tell you a million, but I'm going to tell you this one, guys. This is like my favorite story. I worked for several years on a locked unit with folks who had dementia, so fairly advanced, but they were still walking around and talking, not always making sense. But one time we had a new admission. I'm going to call her Sally. And it was often a really hard transition, as you can imagine, to all of a sudden find yourself in this weird place with a bunch of other people and you couldn't get out. So during her first evening, I just remember she was so distraught, crying, sobbing, why did my family leave me here? I want to go home. Very heartbreaking. And as a communication specialist, I was actually writing my second book. It was a textbook on communication for nurses. So during that time, I think I had some good expertise in terms of communication, but none of my tricks were working. I was validating her and spending time with her, asking the nurse assistants to walk up and down the hall. And of course, she was holding her walker with a very unsteady gait. And that never works really when it's not on the floor. Anyway, so the shift goes on, and one of the nurses' aides, Candace, who she and I had worked together for quite a while, we were both like getting frustrated. What are we going to do? And so I just decided to try something different. And I walked up to the two of them and I put on this really stern face and I said, young ladies, if you don't quiet down this instant, you are going to be in big trouble. And Candace looked at me like this for a second. She's like, what was I talking about? But then she kind of got it. And so her emotional intelligence, which I think was brilliant at this point, was she looked at this patient, we'll say Sally, and said, come on, we better go sit down. And so we don't get in trouble. And so from that point on, so they went and sat down and I brought them some Cheetos and, you know, it was like it was like she couldn't process it intellectually. But I think in retrospect, all of a sudden she had a friend, and whatever horrible situation she was in, she was not alone. And so I give Candace so much credit. And I think part of that was that we had worked together and we trusted each other, and some intuition on my part to just try to do something different. But that Sally trusted me from that point on. She was with us for a few months before she passed, and I could walk into the room, and I think this was true for Candace too. And it was like this wave of recognition, not totally an intellectual. She couldn't have told you my name or that I was a nurse, but she trusted me. And so anything else I needed to do to give her medication, or, you know, she was much calmer. So I like that example.
That's
I have a couple others if you want quick ones.
Give us another.
Okay. I remember once when my mother, who was in Florida, like 1,500 miles south of where I was, and she was in her early 90s, and she had fallen and broken her pelvis. So she was in a rehab, and she was not necessarily the easiest person to get along with. But I found out a few days later, when I was able to get down to see her, that there was a nurse who went in and held her hand in the middle of the night because she was anxious. And it was only probably for a few minutes, but my mother remembered that. And as you can tell, I can remember that right now. So it was a simple, you know, awareness of what my mother might have been experiencing, and a willingness to go in and just be with her for a short period.
You know, just that being that human contact, you know, when a patient is in a clinical setting, it's really anxiety. It gives you so much anxiety, and people are often like scared, and just to have that warmth, that human connection, and that, you know, nurses are so important in that way. You know, they're front line of healthcare, but also the front line of human connection and comfort.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And I'm sure like this past year with COVID, when patients, their families haven't been able to come in and be with them, that's been even more important and challenging probably.
Wow. Yeah. All right. So emotional intelligence is an important asset that many, if not most people, are remarkably short on, and I'm no less guilty. Well, how does emotional intelligence serve in the clinical environment?
It impacts everything that we do. And in some of my work and teaching work, I will often draw parallels between how emotional intelligence impacts patient safety, how it impacts patient experience, how it impacts the health of the workforce, and even cost effectiveness. So there are strong relationships between all of those big outcomes. Because if we are able to identify how we feel and communicate respectfully, we're going to be able to listen to our colleagues better, our patients better. We're going to speak up when we see things happening that are wrong. And so at the roots, those kinds of skills can help us in every single way. So I'm a little bit obsessed about that.
Oh, yes. I think everyone should be. Well, so considering the lack of attention paid to teaching soft skills in nursing school, how can nurses get the training they need to be effective caregivers?
I think there's a variety of ways, and as human beings, we're all at different places on the continuum of developing those skills. But I mean, as simple as reading a book or listening to a podcast. There's a very recent podcast that was done on Sounds True with Tammy Simon. She was the interviewer of Daniel Goleman, and he wrote the first book on emotional intelligence. So even listening to that, coaching, having a career coach, if you're a nurse and trying to think about if you want to change your career path or you want to advance in your particular position, a career coach can help you identify what are your strengths and gifts and where do you want to grow. Those kinds of things are all part of emotional intelligence. I learned a lot from being in therapy, and years ago when I was following a divorce, I was learning how to identify my own needs and wants. So that aspect is part of how I learned I also have learned a lot from improv, taking improv classes.
Right.
And it's kind of funny because I could learn the deeper personal work of reflection in therapy, but I could practice learning new skills, and practice, speaking up and listening and trying out new ways of being, in improv.
Oh, that's great. Well, on that subject, tell me a little bit about medical improv and how it works to help nurses improve the soft skills we've been talking about.
Yeah, thank you. Medical improv is a way of looking at improv so that it's not a performance. It's more about the learning process. So we take the same activities that we might do in improv for a performance, although I'm not really a performer.
Yeah.
But by tweaking them and putting them in the context of other learning goals, then we can take a fun activity, we can play the activity, and then we can put it, the way I do my workshops, I put it in the context of what emotional intelligence or communication skills are we learning, and we have some reflection questions and discussion, and then case scenarios that help pull that thread from the fun ha 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 activity down to where it really makes sense and is helpful in our clinical environments.
Okay, well, should we have a go at it?
I would love to.
Yeah, I'll be a guinea pig. Let's go.
You will? Okay. So Thea, we haven't really played this before. Have you had any improv classes at all?
I mean, when I was a kid, I did drama, but
Okay.
yeah, I've done a little bit.
Dramatic.
Yeah, a while ago.
Okay. Well, because so many of the activities are based on the principle of yes and in improv, I like to do an activity that shows some contrast between what yes and looks like and feels like to what compared to what we often experience in life, which is yes but. So what you and I will do is have two conversations.
Okay.
And I'll let you pick the topic, and the first conversation will be where we say yes and to each other. So I'll make an initial statement, and what you will do is to say yes to that and add something to it. Okay, so we're constantly building something together, and we'll go back and forth a few times.
Okay.
And encourage people that are watching to kind of watch for our different facial expressions and imagine what they might be feeling or what we might be feeling.
Okay.
So
a subject. Well, something I think that immediately comes to mind that's really nothing to do with healthcare is your favorite fruits.
That's a great idea.
That's easy enough. Yeah. Okay. So you want me to start?
Sure. Go ahead. Any statement at all. Okay.
My favorite fruit is mango.
Oh, yes. That's a really wonderful flavored fruit. I'd like to see what it would taste like if we poured some mango smushed up and put it on some vanilla ice cream.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And maybe, what goes really nicely with that tropical fruit would be some like passion fruits or some granadilla puree.
That sounds like it would be awesome. And you know what? If we took some of that puree and the vanilla ice cream and mango juice, maybe we could put it inside like a pie crust and freeze it.
Wow. Pie and ice cream and fruit. I'm down. And afterwards, we can go for a run because there's a lot of calories.
That is a great idea.
Okay.
So that's a little bit where we took what each other said and we acknowledged it from a communication standpoint. We validated each other and then we built on it.
Yeah, it did feel very much like we were layering, and that was very positive. And I mean, it's hard to be negative about desserts, but I can imagine in a interpersonal conversation, or even if you're in an argument, that it could definitely help you negotiate the conflicts a lot better and quicker.
Totally.
Yeah.
It totally does. And hold on to that thought. And let's have another conversation. In fact, if you want to do the same topic, we can.
Yeah. Okay.
This one will be yes, but, and we'll notice what that's like. Would you like to go first or second? You can have the choice.
You go first this time.
Okay. Thea, I just bought the most delicious bunch of bananas at the grocery store.
Ooh, but you know what? I heard that bunches of bananas can hide spiders in them.
Well, but spiders have a right to live too, really, when you think about it.
Spiders, I don't know. I feel like they're dangerous and they can bite you and they can give you nasty bites and kill you.
Well, you can't live your whole life being afraid of spiders.
But why not?
Okay, we're laughing, right?
With,
but why are we laughing? It's like,
yeah.
So go ahead and share some of that experience.
Yeah, so it just feels like we're deconstructing each other's feelings, and it's just really counterproductive because, I mean, well, it's very frustrating. The minute you hear but, you're triggered. You're instantly become defensive. You feel like somebody is not acknowledging or hearing what you're saying, and you just then snowball it by saying but yourself. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot going on in the, the verbal, the words, but also what we're seeing in each other. It's like, no, I don't like what you're saying. I'm not going to agree. And it's like a totally different way of being in relationship.
Yeah.
And
if you're thinking about something serious, in a healthcare setting, a patient's, treatment options or a nurse's conduct or something, that's a lot more serious than talking about, spiders and bananas and fruit and things like that.
Right. So we get to learn the experience and identify our own patterns of behavior and what it feels like when somebody says yes, but to us. And then we know how that impacts other people.
Right.
And oftentimes the question will come up, well, we can't agree all the time. And that's absolutely true. This exercise isn't designed to make you say yes to everything, but it's designed to help you be a better listener so that you can validate first. If you want to disagree, in fact, nurses need to be assertive and say when they don't agree. It's just that's a separate thing. So I can hear you. Let me make sure I understand you. Get that. That's one pathway. Now, I want to tell you something about that. That's how I feel.
Right.
And one of the best examples in healthcare, going back to when somebody with dementia, if they say, I want to go home, and we say things like, well, this is your home, or you can't go home, or have some ice cream. Those are very common. You can see somebody's like getting like really angry because they can tell. They might not be able to tell from the words, but they can tell they're being butted. Instead of saying, you want to go home? Oh, me too. Tell me about your home.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
It's a completely different experience.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you've built a business around the idea of using medical improv to help nurses and other healthcare professionals develop these soft skills. So tell me how you conceived of the idea and how you now use it today to help people.
Thank you. Yeah, I mentioned that I had gotten divorced like 20 years ago now, so it's easy for me to smile about it. But back then, I had been in a relationship with another woman for about 10 years. And she was the biological mother of our son, who was 5 years old at the time. And so she decided to leave the relationship when she came to me at one point and said she was in love with somebody else. So that was heartbreaking for me. It got me into therapy. I was also very scared that I was going to lose my son because as his non-biological mother 25 years ago, who was I in the school system? Who was I in any kind of legal proceeding with other parents, teachers, and so forth? So early on, my therapist said, well, we've got to figure out how you got here. And we started to work on that. And she also told me to be visible in the school. So as I started to, explore how I had contributed to a relationship that went that, I guess, badly, although, 20 years later, I can see that it was a gift. But at the time, I couldn't. I realized how I had given up my voice in that relationship, and I tended to acquiesce. It was foreign for me to be able to identify what I needed and wanted, and I was worried that if I did identify those things, that was I would get rejected and that kind of stuff.
Right.
I also had to step up and be very assertive. I had to be at a time when it wasn't easy for me, but my son needed me, and he was a great incentive to stay. Every parent meeting, every show, and it wasn't easy because my ex-partner, we'd go to a school play, and she would be there with her new partner,
Oh, Lord.
her mother and her mother's husband, her father and her father's girlfriend, and her brother and his wife, and I would be there like just showing up.
Used to be your family, and now it's someone else's.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I learned, though, I really took a deep dive, and I will forever be grateful for the help that I got in doing that, because it's helped me to be a much healthier person. Not that I don't have challenges, and I'm still learning.
Yeah.
But then my son, who was with me half of the time, we took an improv class together because I could see him thriving in theater. He's shy at home, or shy in school. He wasn't shy at home, but the same vibrancy that I would see in my living room, he would be that way on stage and with his theater friends. Anyway, so this community improv class taught me that the things that I was learning in therapy, I could actually play with and practice and have fun with other nice people in improv. And so that started me on this path of integrating improv. There are other things that come into play. I found that as I was trying to be more assertive, I could not do that in the culture I was working with as a nurse. Like I'd say, I can't work this weekend because my son's with me. And I'd get a response from my boss would say like, well, there's the door. You can't be a team player. My colleagues would say, well, I had to do it. So I just got very frustrated. I decided to go to graduate school. I continued to take improv classes. I developed a model that used theater games to teach emotional intelligence to children, thinking at the time that I was going to get out of healthcare. But, and actually my son Curran, he actually was like my assistant for some grant work that I did with kids later on using this model.
Oh, sweet.
So let's see. But then I had a chance to teach in a graduate program for healthcare administrators. And at that time, there was a book that was published by the Institute of Medicine, and it was called Crossing the Quality Chasm. And it was part of this, we were becoming very aware that we were making a lot of mistakes in healthcare. Back then, it was like, there's 99,000 deaths per year based on medical error. Since that time, it's even before COVID, there was another report by John James, a NASA professor, who lost his son to a medical error. And that was like 400,000 deaths per year because of medical error. And the leading root cause underlying those errors is communication. So, I started developing my consulting business more about teaching communication skills, emotional intelligence, team building, that type of thing. Since I was taking improv classes, I naturally kind of started to weave those activities into my workshops. And, I can talk about, I remember like my first listening workshop, it was probably obnoxious because all I did was me talking about, this is what you do to listen. What's really effective is to provide people with opportunities where they can feel heard and where they can practice the skills. And I think we'll share a video called Same Time Story, which is an activity where one person tells a story. It's hard to do video because of this can be a little bit of a lag, but one person tells a story, this other person tries to tell it at the same time, which sounds a little bizarre, right?
Yeah.
What it can teach is you have to be so focused on the other person and the person has to go slow enough, so there's an inherent collaboration. But you pay attention to facial expressions and the kind of debrief. One nurse told me once that was the first time she ever felt heard.
Oh.
Yeah. And so I think, oh my gosh, how do we expect her to be a good listener? She doesn't know what feeling heard is like.
You know, it's like the more we speak about this, the more I feel like it's, because at first I was sort of focused on the healthcare aspect of this medical improv and of these skills. And it's just like the more we talk, the more I find it's so relatable. And it's about being human and relating to other human beings.
Absolutely.
And then purposing that in a medical environment to provide better care.
Absolutely.
And to avoid mistakes. Like, you know, the patient could be trying to tell you about a symptom or could be exhibiting a symptom. Like, I watched this episode of some medical drama the other day, and the patient was talking and then stopped and looked into the distance for 2 seconds. And the doctor caught that patient had a stroke or a seizure, had a seizure. And, you know, if you're not paying attention, you could miss tiny signs and symptoms. But yeah, so it's just human, and all of these soft skills are just essential to be happy, have happy relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that we, you know, as we learn to have these therapeutic boundaries and professional boundaries, as well as personal boundaries, it is all about being healthier and happier in any kind of work. It's just the application for the medical improv is healthcare. And I actually think that because, and I think if we look at our whole world, if we could bring this stuff, make it more available to everybody, it helps level the playing field. Improv does that because you're always sharing responsibility for the story. And since healthcare interfaces with all of diversity, we have this potential to model healthy, respectful, empowering language and experiences with the world.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Well, Beth, thank you so much for speaking to me today. I think this is such an important subject for nurses, but also for everyone to watch and to practice in everyday life. So I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you so much, Thea. It's been a pleasure.
There are just no hard and fast rules to apply to the human psyche because every person and situation is so nuanced and unique. And this is exactly why nurses need to be dexterous in their ability to listen and communicate and have a healthy and strong separation of self from their working environment and the people they treat. So whether you are training to be a nurse or have already embarked upon your career, don't neglect to develop your emotional intelligence. And if you need a little assistance, go to bethboynton.com and register for one of her soul expanding classes. Also, we've provided some really helpful links below to articles and videos with targeted advice on developing those different soft skills, so check them out. If you are studying to become a registered nurse or nurse practitioner, make sure you get Brainscape's NCLEX or nursing flashcards, which will help you study so much more efficiently and keep up that healthy cadence of daily review that is so essential for doing well in these content-heavy subjects. For even more guidance, check out the other videos we have on Brainscape's nursing channel and go to the Academy for A to Z study guides on how to excel in nursing school and beyond. These tools, together with your ambition and hard work, is everything you need to rise to your challenge.